Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today we have attorney Rod Dixon of the Dixon Firm in Atlanta speaking to us. Rod focuses his practice exclusively on personal injury law, which ranges from trucking accidents to shooting cases to medical malpractices. He has taken many of his cases to trial and secured multi-million-dollar verdicts for his clients. Rod is recognized as a top lawyer by Super Lawyers, the National Trial Lawyers, and Georgia Trend magazine. His law firm is the Dixon Firm, and they are located in Midtown Atlanta. And you can read more about the Dixon Firm by visiting their website, dixonfirm.com. Welcome to the show, Rod Dixon.
Thank you, Neil. Glad to be here.
Well, let's get right into learning a little bit more about you, but we want to get to the good content as soon as we can. So tell us a little bit about your background, why you became a lawyer, and then ultimately what kind of clients is it that you help?
Sure. I am currently 43 years old. I grew up a poor guy in rural West Tennessee, and it was at that time that I started to, formulate what I wanted to do for a living and quickly realized I would like to be a lawyer, number one, for the opportunity it would give me to lift my family out of financial distress. But number two, also because it would allow me the opportunity to help people in different ways. And so I attended the University of Florida for my undergraduate studies and then went to the University of Tennessee for law school. After I graduated, I started practice at one of the biggest law firms in the country and defended medical malpractice cases primarily for about 4 years. And then I moved to a smaller firm and continued that line of work for about 6 years. After that, or I should say through that process, I realized that my talents and my desires were pushing me in a different direction from defending these cases to actually representing people who were victims of negligence, whether it's medical, automobile negligence in any arena. And so in 2009, I started my personal injury practice, and I've been doing that since.
And I'm sure it gives you great insights being on the other side of the courtroom and defending that side to now going to the personal injury side and being able to, plead your case with that knowledge of what the other side is really looking to do.
Well, that certainly has been a benefit to my personal injury practice. When I was on the defense side, I had the opportunity to work and learn from really some of the finest trial lawyers in the country. Lawyers who were defending cases, of course, but they were just terrific trial attorneys. One of my mentors was inducted into one of the most prestigious lawyer associations alongside Chief Justice John Roberts. They were in the same induction class in London, England. And my mentor gave the speech of acceptance on behalf of that class. And Chief Justice Roberts asked him for a copy of his speech. That is something that was a great honor to him, but I actually consider it a great honor to myself having the opportunity to learn from someone of that caliber. And then when I started my personal injury practice on the plaintiff side, it came to be a great benefit knowing the defense side, knowing how to look at cases from that perspective, knowing what to expect from defense lawyers, but also I didn't anticipate this, but it turned out to be terrific, is that a lot of the defense lawyers I run into now were lawyers I worked with when I was a defense lawyer. And so I came into this plaintiff's practice and have continued it with a degree of respect that was already there from the lawyers that I'm now going against. And that is tremendously.
Right. So tell me what a plaintiff looks like. What kind of people do you regularly represent?
That's a very good question. plaintiffs come from all walks of life. The one thing about negligence and personal injury is that it can affect anyone, no matter where you are in the country, no matter your station in life, no matter your sex, race, it can affect anyone. And so my clients come from literally every walk of life. I have people who are clients who are unemployed, and I have people who are executives in top companies around the country. When personal injury strikes, it doesn't care who you are. And so I represent folk in areas that involve medical malpractice. I do that probably about 20% of the time. I represent, and this is unfortunate that this happens, and especially happens so much, but I represent a lot of women and children, sadly enough, who are victims of sexual assault. And I also represent people who have been involved in car accidents, whether they're relatively minor or major accidents that involve death or paralysis. So there are various ways that we are able to help people in various areas who are injured by the negligence of someone else.
So let's talk about a few of those things that you mentioned. Let's talk about the injury. And in Atlanta or Georgia, they have that sign up on the roads telling you how many people have died through car accidents. And, there's so many accidents and the roads are, pretty bad out there. So there's a lot of people getting injured in car accidents. What's the first thing that they should do?
Well, the first thing they should do is try to make sure they are in a safe place. You would probably not be surprised by this, but so many times there are accidents that occur and the person who's involved or people involved aren't able to get to a point of safety, and a subsequent accident happens that involves them and makes matters even worse. An example, I once represented a lady who was involved in a small accident on I-75 here in Georgia. She pulled over into the median and was on the phone talking to her husband, trying to get him to come out to help her. He told her to stay in the car, which was actually reasonable advice, given this was rush hour traffic on I-75, which is one of the busiest interstates in the country. She sat in the car, and while she was on the phone talking to him, a tractor trailer came along and hit her and killed her. He was literally on the phone with his wife when the phone went dead. And that was the point when the tractor trailer hit her. If she had been able to, it would have been best to totally remove herself from that situation. But we see these accidents occur frequently where people are not able to remove themselves from danger or don't remove themselves from the danger, and something worse comes along and affects them. So that would be number one. Number two, call the authorities. You want to get the police officers out there, the first responders, fire department, the ambulance. You want to get them out there as quickly as possible to make sure that everybody's needs are addressed, from documenting what happened in the accident to addressing any injuries that occurred. After that, it's very important to go and get the medical care that you need if you were injured in that accident. That may entail a trip in an ambulance to an emergency department, or someone taking you to an emergency department, or maybe if it's not that bad, you going to see your primary care doctor within the next day or two. But it's always important, even if you believe at that point that the accident was minor and that you're just feeling some aches and pains, to go see your doctor, because we frequently see what you feel as a minor ache or pain the day of the accident or the day after turn into something much more serious. So it's important to get proper medical attention immediately. And then once you do that, if the circumstances dictate, in other words, if someone else caused this accident and caused you to be injured, call your lawyer and let your lawyer step in and help you through the rest of the process, whether it's getting your car fixed or compensating you for your medical expenses and your pain and suffering.
Yeah, oftentimes people think, oh, it's, no big deal. I'm okay, just, a little bit sore, but that pain can stay with them for, a week, a month, and result in other problems. Is it too late at that point to go back and try and get compensation?
It depends upon how long you wait in Georgia. And this is generally the same across the country, although it does vary state to state. You have 2 years from the point of injury to bring a claim for your personal injuries. And it's when you bring a claim for your personal injuries, it's for your medical expenses, your lost wages, your pain and suffering, for everything that was caused by that accident. So generally you have in Georgia 2 years to do that. In Tennessee, you have a year, for example. In Florida, you have up to 4 years. But it's state by state. But generally, well, no place has less than a year. Usually it's 2 years. Sometimes it's longer than that. But the point you raise is an important one. I personal example, I was involved in a rear end accident about 15 years ago. I went to the emergency department after the accident, but I didn't get any further medical treatment, even though over the course of the next 2 months, my neck continued to hurt. But I was a young man and decided I'd just suck it up, that I'd be fine eventually. And the pain did subside. But then as I grew older, it started coming back. And so now 15 years later, I'm still dealing with neck problems. I can't go back and bring a lawsuit or a claim against anyone because it's certainly too late now. So the key to getting the medical care early, one of the keys, is that when you are injured, the sooner you start treatment, the more likely you are to prevent a worsening of that condition down the line. The longer you wait to get something treated, the harder it's going to be to fix. And so you get the treatment as early as you can, and that way it can help prevent some of the problems down the line. And then it can put you in a position of knowing the extent of your injury so you can make a proper claim. Right.
And talking about a proper claim, how do you document what happened? Because I know, in a serious injury, the ambulance is going to get there, the police are going to get there, the fire brigade are going to get there. But do you feel that they document the case as your client remembers it?
Well, that's another excellent question, Neil. You've got great questions. The police who respond are responsible for generating a report that details the findings at the scenes and maybe comes to some conclusions about what caused the accident. Here in Georgia, and it's the same in every state around the country, if the accident is serious enough, there's a special crash team that will come out and actually reconstruct the accident to determine what the cause of the accident was. And then, of course, your medical care providers are supposed to document your injuries and the medical treatment you received, and the police reports and reconstructions. And in the tell me were not as they recalled. And at that point, that's where the lawyer comes in to help make sure that everything that's in the police report, everything that's in the medical records is what actually happened. So here's a case in point. A few years back, I represented the family of a lady who was killed while on the side of the road. And the driver who killed her was a young man, and he was driving along and he hit her, and he told the responding officer that she walked into the roadway after her car became disabled, and that he didn't see her in time, and he hit her and killed her. The police officer, not having any witnesses to the contrary necessarily, took that young man's statement and he went on his way. The family retained me and had questions about why, particularly these three sons, why their mother was killed. And so I had the police report. I saw what the police report said, but then I hired an accident reconstructionist who actually went out to the scene and looked at the scene, examined the forensic evidence there, and then went to where the vehicles that were involved in the collision were stored and pulled black box data from both vehicles. Vehicles these days have black box data, just like airplanes, and pulled and took photographs and measurements of the vehicles and analyzed all that and said, you know, Rod, based upon what I see here, the driver that hit your client actually left the roadway and went into the median and struck your client there. And it started to shape a different picture than the police report indicated. But then the clincher was that I requested the driver's cell phone records. And when I got the cell phone records, it was crystal clear that this guy was sending and receiving text messages at the time he hit my client or hit my client's mother and killed her. And so I called the number that these text messages were going to and he was receiving them from and talked to the person on that end. And as it turned out, it was his ex-fiance, and they were having a fight via text message while this man was driving the car on this dark highway at 10 o'clock at night. And so these are things that the police never got because they didn't investigate further. And so that's why it's important that we look at what the police do. We look at what the medical care providers do. We accept that they're trying to do their jobs properly, but we look at everything with a critical eye because sometimes the full story is not being told by what's in the documents.
And I'm sure you've got plenty stories like that. Everybody has a different side of the story or their own truth. So it's important that you do get the facts as you see them or how you can prove in court. But let's move on a little bit to the medical malpractice, because I know that is another leading cause of death, and there's a lot of problems within the medical field. What major issues do you deal with in that field?
You're right. Medical errors, medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in the United States. And in that area, there are myriad issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. I'll tell you one of the ones that is most troublesome to me is that because of the way the law is set up, it is very difficult to pursue medical malpractice cases that are somewhat small. For example, there are just an uncountable amount of medical errors that occur that might have a full value of about $50,000. The problem is that to bring most medical malpractice cases, it's going to cost you in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $100,000.
Right.
And so when you have a client with a case that is a $50,000 case because that person was legitimately hurt by something that should not have happened, and we look at it as lawyers and we say, it's going to cost us, we estimate $70,000 to pursue this case and win for you. Obviously, that's not a proposition that anybody would step into because it's the client's actually going to end up losing money. So that's one of the saddest parts of the medical malpractice work that we do. And it goes along with the fact that this area of law is under constant attack. And it is that way, even though the studies show that the amount of money that's awarded in medical malpractice cases, the ones that go to trial, the ones that are settled, it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny portion of what victims deserve and would be able to obtain if all of the smaller cases could be brought and prosecuted appropriately. What are some of the other problems we encounter? The field of medical malpractice is, at least from the plaintiff side, is difficult because the law, for various reasons, and I apologize for that, favors the medical community and does not favor the victim. And so it becomes more difficult for the victim to pursue the case because, for example, every case requires an expert who will come in and say that the doctor at issue committed malpractice. Well, if you're a victim in Georgia, you're going to have a hard time finding a Georgia physician to come in and criticize another Georgia physician.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a difficult proposition. And so you go to Tennessee or you go to New York or you go to Illinois or North Carolina or Florida, and maybe you're able to find someone there, but then you have to bring that person to Georgia and explain to a Georgia jury why you're bringing someone in from out of state.
Right.
So that makes it a bit of an uphill battle. What also makes it an uphill battle, this is actually one of the more curious parts of the work we do. I spend a lot of time taking depositions of doctors and of the experts who support their care. And I'm not a doctor. And so I have to literally go in to cross-examine these folk about subject matter that they spent years studying and years practicing. And so it is an intellectual exercise of epic proportions to prepare yourself to go in and question someone about their own expertise.
Right.
And it's the way the system is set up, and that's fine. But it is one of the more interesting aspects of the work we do in that area. And when I'm able to go in and go toe to toe, so to speak, with these doctors in their field of care, and at the end have them say something like, you're pretty smart. It makes me feel like I have done my client a good service.
Well, there's a lot of homework, that's for sure, in the law industry. Every case is different, and you got to find out all the facts. It's a continual learning environment. But what shocks me is these smaller cases. That seems like an opportunity there to really help. Is there no workable solution for that right now?
That's a difficult solution. There have been groups, plaintiffs' lawyers, defense lawyers, doctors' organizations for years who have looked at this issue to try to address it in a fair manner. But you are faced with many, many obstacles that no side is sure will actually solve the problem. For example, if all of these cases, these smaller cases are brought, the doctors and their insurance companies actually don't want that to happen for obvious reasons.
Right.
It's going to mean way more medical malpractice awards being paid out than occurs right now. And so it's a disincentive for them to want to step up and support that type of reform. Also, the reality of the costs associated with these cases, there's really not a whole lot that can be done about that. One of the biggest costs, we touched on it already, is the cost of an expert witness. And so the experts are the ones who make their rates. And if you want somebody who knows what he or she is talking about, it's just not inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have to incur some of these costs anyway, regardless of what you do to try to allow some of these smaller cases to be brought to light. Would it benefit those folk with the smaller cases? Yes. But it may actually, it would probably do so in a way that would not gain support from, and these people have to support it from the insurance industry.
Right. Okay. Well, we've talked about, how you help your clients and, the benefits of having a lawyer to, be in your corner and to fight for the plaintiff. against the defense. But tell me some of the myths about personal injury law that people might think that aren't actually true.
Well, one of the biggest myths, misconceptions, bad raps, so to speak, that these cases generate or that are out there with respect to these cases is the sort of lottery aspect that people sometimes associate with these cases. In other words, they see someone who is injured, and keep this in mind, Neil, the cases that make the headlines that people see, the $1 million verdicts that maybe make some people mad, are a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the cases that are out there. What you never see in the headlines are the cases where a jury tells a victim they get nothing. And so with medical malpractice, for example, the doctors and hospitals win 95% of those trials, win them outright, and pay nothing to the victims. And so the perception that there is just money constantly flowing from one hand to another is a misconception. And one of the biggest things that really hurt the perceived reality was, of course, that famous McDonald's hot coffee case.
Right.
And that it actually, that was 20 plus years ago, and it still comes up when I'm selecting a jury now. What people saw was the headline that this lady who spilled hot coffee on herself got, I believe, a $3 million verdict from a jury. And people just see that and think it's outrageous because everyone knows coffee is hot. Mm-hmm. And so how could you get multiple millions of dollars because you spill something on you that is hot when you knew it was hot? But when you dig deeper, and that's what we do as lawyers, when you dig deeper, you begin to understand what happened there. You begin to understand that McDonald's had, over the years, thousands of complaints about how hot the coffee was. You begin to understand that McDonald's was regularly and systematically brewing their coffee at a temperature that far exceeded even their own recommendations. And you see that people were getting second and third degree burns and were reporting these to McDonald's. And then when you get to the trial part, you see that the jury awarded to this lady 1 day's profit from McDonald's sale of coffee. Mm-hmm. That just 1 day's profit from coffee sales was what was represented in that dollar amount. And then when you dig deeper and you go further into the story, you see that because of different things that happened at the trial, different procedural issues, the judge actually ended up reducing that award to about $350,000.
Oh, wow.
So you get the salacious headline, if you will, but you don't see how the justice system continued to work in that case to where the award was actually just about 10% of what the jury actually thought. Mm-hmm. And so these cases pop up, these big headlines pop up, and then they totally disappear, but they leave the public with this perception that is not actually reality.
Right. And, the news can have that headline to say whatever they want, and that's what the people believe. So let's talk about some of the fears that people have. Why would they not contact a personal injury attorney like yourself?
Sure. There may be several reasons. Number one, there are people who genuinely just do not believe that they should sue someone for money. And that may be philosophical, it may be religious, it may be a variety of things, but that can sometimes stop someone or halt someone. Another fear is that their situation might become public. And I mentioned that I do a lot of work with victims of sexual assault, women and children, a lot. And victims of sexual assault are sometimes very afraid about the public learning about what they went through because it's embarrassing. It can be embarrassing. The assailant could still be out there. And so they are dealing with this tremendous psychological weight. And they fear that bringing in a lawsuit, contacting a lawyer might make that even worse. I have a good friend who is involved in a women's group, and she has a member of her group who she knows was sexually assaulted. And she told me the lady just does not want to come forward, not just with a lawyer, but doesn't even want to come forward against her attacker to the law enforcement officers. Mm-hmm. And so when I'm working within this area, I see those fears a lot. I represent a young lady named Jayla Gladden, and I can say her name because it's public. She was kidnapped from the parking lot in front of a Kroger grocery store and driven an hour away and raped. And she decided to come out publicly about her ordeal. For one, it's helped her from a therapeutic standpoint to talk about it. But number two, she utilized her iPhone and the GPS and location features on that to actually draw the police to where she was. And the police actually saved her. And so she wanted to make women, everyone, but women in particular, aware about these features on their telephone that could actually save their lives. And so I commend her all the time for stepping up and, number one, putting this guy in jail. Number two, speaking with women about her issue because it can help empower them. And number three, teaching the world about these features on these phones that can prove to be so valuable. But that's a very, very difficult thing to do. And I do understand why women may not want to do that.
Right. And, like you say, education is paramount in those kinds of cases, knowing what to do if something like that should happen to you and, doing the best that you can for yourself in those situations. Now, Rod, I appreciate everything that you do. You are in the business that's really helping people out with their problems, which I love. Tell me what somebody should look for if they are evaluating a personal injury lawyer. What's important for them to find out before they make any decisions?
One of the biggest things that's important is that you have a lawyer who has a track record of taking cases to trial and actually winning at trial. Why is that important? Because usually when we're dealing with these cases, the insurance company is involved. And the insurance companies know the lawyers who actually go to trial and get results at trial. It's important because if you are in a case and you're trying to negotiate an appropriate settlement, the threat of trial is one that actually helps the insurance company place a fair value on a case. So in other words, if the insurance company does not believe you will take a case to trial, they are not going to offer you the right value for that case. And so that's one of the big questions I would advise anyone to ask their lawyer. Tell me about your record at trial. Number two, tell me about your experience in this area of law. There are lots of personal injury lawyers who operate within different areas, whether it's car accidents or sexual assault or negligent security. But do they have the experience in those areas to actually properly evaluate your case, work it up, and get you the result you deserve? So experience at trial, experience in that particular area, those are the two biggest things I would ask any potential lawyer who is to represent me.
Great advice. Now, Rod Dixon, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. We've got lots of helpful information from you, but if people want more information, what is the best way for them to get in contact with you and your firm?
The best way, I think, and the easiest way is to go to my website, which is dixonfirm.com, DIXONFIRM.com. There you can read up about what we do as lawyers at this law firm, our results, track record, so to speak, and also see any contact information that you need. But beyond that, though, even if it's not for the purpose of hiring me or the lawyers here at this firm, you can get information about various areas of personal injury and negligence that might prove helpful. We have a sexual assault resources center that you can go to find resources if you're a victim of sexual assault, or you can go and read up about trucking accidents and what can happen in those circumstances. You can read about what to do if you are involved in an accident. You can read about what happens in a situation where there's a cancer misdiagnosis. And so it can actually provide a resource for educating you about various situations that exist.
Well, thank you again for doing what you do. You're helping people out in their time of need, and you've got all those resources at your website, dixonfirm.com. And lastly, thanks again for being a guest on Expert Profiles Atlanta.
Thank you, Neil. I appreciate the time. I appreciate you speaking with me.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.